Hi, Angela. Welcome to the Leadermorphosis podcast. So happy that you're here.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. I think I shared with you when we spoke before that we at Chorus are real fans of the podcast. We talk about every episode and we get into great conversations about it. So it's really delightful to be in this conversation with this community, like around the world. So yeah, thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure.
Oh.
Yeah, when we first spoke, you were like quoting different episodes back to me. I was like, oh, wow, okay. It's really nice. So, where should we start? Could you start by sharing with the listeners a bit about Chorus? What is Chorus as an organization, and what was the starting point of this journey towards exploring self-management?
Mm, sure. So, so one of our kind of favorite expressions in Chorus is that Chorus is porous. So when we talk about ourselves, we do talk about ourselves as a community that does stretch beyond the organizational walls. But if I tell you about the organization itself, it is about 1,000 people right now. We're about 1,000 people who are both paid team members and volunteers. We have a really large volunteer community. We we support people to live in the community who are either aging or living with a disability or on a mental health recovery journey, and work with about 12,000 people across metropolitan WA and metropolitan country WA. And
That's
Chorus
Western
was
Australia for
that is
non-Australians.
that's right, Western Australia. Thank you. Um, And Chorus was born, it was kind of born in 2017 and launched in 2018 from three organizations that actually jointly had been in Western Australia and Perth for, I think the oldest one was about 70 years old. So they came together because the the boards of those three organizations were really committed to doing something very different in the world of community-based care. They saw the world was changing. They saw that there were some challenges on the horizon for small organizations like them, and they came together with a real commitment to thinking through what do we want the future of community-based care to look like, and they knew as small organizations they really were going to be quite unsustainable. So created Chorus. Chorus then came into existence with that very deep commitment. And, so one of the things that for me is always um, a real strength of this organization is even that the success, even of that very original merger. Mergers aren't always successful, and bringing three organizations together which had really different cultures and values and it says a lot about the DNA and the baseline commitments of this kind of a system and what it was up to that original measure was so successful. So that was like 2017, 2018, and there was a new board established and a new CEO was appointed. At that time there was a fairly traditional kind of hierarchy. And then 2020, 2021, the real thinking began about if we want to do something very different in communities, who do we need to be as a member of that community and as a citizen, as a community citizen? And that was really when the idea emerged to completely redesign the organization and move from what was a very traditional, hierarchical, centrally orientated, all the control and management at the center, and a team of 700 or 800 support workers out in the community to 20 local, very small connected teams who then provided services in a very distinct neighborhood across all the different kinds of care models. And at the time it was known as Chorus 2.0. So that there was Chorus 1 and then there was Chorus 2.0. And that decentralization, so really, from 2021, we're now 2026. So the last 5 years has been really embedding that model, making sure that model is sustainable and effective in local communities, and really thinking about, well, what's next in terms of how that gets expanded. Yeah, that's kind of where it grew from. I think that if that kind of says enough about that for now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was kind of an ambitious goal from the start of merging those three organizations, and then kind of continuing to follow that kind of North Star to its like extreme, or
Yeah.
almost like if we're really serious about this, then we could make the organization look completely different if we really
Yeah.
walked the talk.
And I think the other thing is this very deep commitment that suggests that if we have, so you want to think about the work that we do. So we're in people's homes, the people who work in Chorus, including me, like every single person at Chorus delivers services to customers. Or we have relationships with people in the community who are sometimes Chorus customers. So we're in people's homes, and this ambition and aspiration to think about, well, what does it look like to support communities to thrive and have thriving lives? And, what would it take for us to be really confident that every time a support worker walked into somebody's house, they felt empowered and had personal agency, and they felt confident to connect and really partner that person to make decisions about what was going to be, what works for them. And it's impossible to do that unless they feel enabled and empowered and have personal agency. And, this is a workforce that's traditionally underpaid and don't have a lot of time and investment in their growth and development and their personal leadership. So I think the decentralization of power and control at Chorus is very much a function of going, if we want to be in the community as community members and we want to support people in the community have great lives, the people who do that work have to have great lives. And so that was the baseline of really thinking through, well, what kind of organizational structure would fulfill on that, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was way before I arrived. So it was really bold. It was a really bold move. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that approach because I think a kind of trap can be to sort of try and helicopter in some kind of structure or copy paste some other organization's way of doing things. And of course you can be inspired by organizations, but I think I'm just seeing more and more that coming back to these like fundamental assumptions about people, about the work that we're doing, that the kind of create the invisible rules of the game, and just starting to question some of those assumptions and then build an organization around that based on this group of people that we have is much more powerful than trying to sort of install something,
Yeah. And I think I hear that a lot, even as we listen to everybody you've had on the podcast, not that we've listened to everybody, but when we listen to the people who share on the podcast, I think this really deep theme about is you do need to work it out with your community. You do need to work it out, based on what the work is you're doing and what your context is. And, so we're still working it out. We're definitely still working it out.
Yeah. There's lots of fun things we'll dive into in a bit more detail. So let's talk about when you join the organization then. So what is the organization like when you join? What kinds of things are you then starting to look at in your role?
So I may say a little, maybe if I can take a minute to say a little about my own kind of career journey as well. So I'm, late in my career now. I'm at the kind of towards the twilight of my career, shall we say. And I started my career in community development. Spent the first kind of 15 years of my own career working in communities, empowering, trying to support communities to do things that they were interested in doing. And then I, moved in and out of leading organizational development and leadership development, mostly in large organizations, as well as working in consultancy. And then on the side, like I had this whole other side gig career, not really a gig, but, work that I did, which, so I was involved very early in the global eco-village movement, and I was involved in the global kind of democratic education movement. I unschooled my kid, and I created an organization for unschoolers and in 3 different places where I lived. And so, I trained in sociocracy very early on before it was a thing, when it was really kind of early.
Cool.
And before it was cool. Yeah, like a long time ago. Not even before it was cool, but, really before. So I'm thrilled that some of these ways of thinking are very much more contemporary and very much more open and public now. Because I always felt like I had my job and then I had this other thing that I did, but I couldn't really do this other thing in the world that I called my career or my work. So, by the time I came to Chorus, I was really looking for something where it was, well, is there a place that I can integrate these? Because I know that this works. Like, I had built and evolved and participated in really successful eco-villages, and ran this democratic organization really successfully in my spare time, not in my day job. And I'm like, this works. This really does work. But then I'll go to work and have to deal with, well, why can't we do this here? And I think in many ways I did do it, just in terms of you just do what you can do to share power and evolve agency. But so then I saw this really interesting job ad for, this is who we are and here's what we're up to. And I was kind of, this looks intriguing. And so I joined Chorus kind of mid 2022. And when I arrived, one of the things that was very obvious was that there had been this very bold, ambitious move to radically decentralize everything, take all of the hierarchy out, take all of the structures out. Nobody reported to anybody. But it was a bit wild, like, because there hadn't been any new structures built to replace that. So there was, we couldn't at that point, for example, I don't think anybody in the organization at that point would have been confident about if we'd had an audit, would we have passed it? Or, how are we doing in terms of business performance, or who's actually making decisions? So there was a bit of either nobody was making them or everybody was making them, or when it got too hard, it just went to Dan as the CEO, because that was just by default. If nobody else would make one, that would be where it would go. So I think the skill set that I brought was both a little bit of the all of the organizational leadership development work that I had done meant that there was a space that I could bring to the organization in terms of capability building. But actually, all of the things that I had learned and practiced in my not job around how do you do circle-based or flat governance, and how do you build the system's capacity to challenge and propose and counter-challenge, and how do you build those practices and routines and rituals where people who typically haven't felt like they had a voice can have a voice, and not, and deal with the power dynamics and the because they don't disappear because you take a structure out. They're still there. And I think that's probably mostly what I've played the last couple, the last 2 or 3 years. But and it's definitely been an evolution. So we've created some structures, and they didn't work, and then we went, oh, well, they didn't work, we're going to have to create some new ones. But I would say that there's nothing that's been created. Some have been created and have sustained. Some have been created and they've either been retired. We call it, we're going to retire that now, or they've dissolved. But every single time you build capacity, you build the system's capacity to operate in that way, decide things in that way, take accountability in a different way, deal with experimentation and failure. And I think both in terms of my technical skill set and I think just the demeanor about going, oh, that's cool, we'll just figure that out. And, like, and also I think the other thing that, not just me, but I think the other thing we're getting much better at is dealing with how do we keep standing in here in the face of auditors challenging it, or, funders going, how is this working? Or, all of the other relationships outside of the internal ones that, they need to be reassured. They need to be confident that we've got public money and we're taking care of people's health and well-being. And there needs to be a level of reassurance and structure that goes, no, we've got this. It's good. Nobody's getting hurt. We're not being reckless. And so, yeah, that's not quite sure quite how I answered that question, but that's kind of what's present around just like really being conscientious about, I think particularly in this kind of industry, that there is a leadership group in Chorus that we call the stewarding group, and we take stewarding really seriously. We are stewarding public money and public confidence, and like we're nobody's ever really been reckless about that, but the structures to demonstrate that stewardship was being appropriately governed and demonstrated probably just was really missing in the first couple of years, I would say, of when that new model got put into place.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting when I've been reading about chorus and when you and I had our kind of pre-chat, I think chorus is a really strong example of, yes, as you said, you've been on this journey of kind of testing out and experimenting and evolving different structures to create clarity, to create accountability. And I think what's quite unique about you is that you're also very development focused. So there's a big focus on like the inner development and supporting people in this shift, because
Yeah.
it's a big paradigm shift from how most people are used to working in organizations. So could you share something about, that kind of inner and outer work lens, if you like, and how that looks at chorus and what some of the things you've been developing?
Yeah. Sorry, what was immediately comes to mind is some days it looks like people crying a lot in the car. Like it really does. And so there's something around how, let me have a think, where will I start with this? We do spend a lot of time doing inside out work and outside in work. So no, and it's very explicit, and we're more and more explicit in our language about, oh, this is a me thing, or no, that's a you thing, or no, actually this is an us thing, and we're going to have to get it out on the table and deal with it. And daily in our language, like there are days that I kind of, I do come home and think, oh my God, it's such a joy to have these conversations every day. I think one of the things I love most about working with chorus is that I never, and I think it's not me, I think this is pretty common, and we get a lot of feedback from people about this. You never have to pretend to be anything other than yourself. And I think that's a real feature of really good developmental organizations, is there's more and more and more space where you can put down the mask and put down the who you have to pretend to be and just be more and more yourself. But that also means dealing with all of the things, dealing with the yourself that is there. And so again, it's quite explicit. The stewardship group, which is about 13 or 14 people, who exercise system-wide leadership. We did a 6-day intensive piece of learning around leadership maturity and adult development. We have all been measured in terms of our developmental stage. We do shared coaching work and individual coaching work routinely. Like we have an external coach who works with us, who's and I think the other thing that is a little interesting about chorus and not that common is we do have a number of people in that group who are at really late stages developmentally. So for people who are maybe less familiar with that model, if you think about Lalou's model, who I know you've talked about, that green stage, that kind of integral stage rather than teal stage rather than the more redefining stage. We actually have 4 people in our organization who are late stage strategist, alchemist leaders. And that makes the biggest difference, because you've just got a lot of people who can hold the emotional charge and all of the polarities and work really effectively together. They don't all have the same job. Some, they're not all they don't all have the same job title, or they don't have the same kind of level of accountability, but they're people who have said, I'll take organization-wide accountability for this organization, and I'll bring all of that capacity to help us work together to keep leaning into the edges of discomfort and the emotional weight and mental weight that we're holding together to fulfill in this future that nobody has any idea how to turn out. Like literally nobody has any idea how to turn out. So again, we invest time in it, we invest energy, we invest personally in it. We just, we invest. It's really hard to be invisible. It's really hard to, it's really hard. I had coaching last week, and, one of the things, it's kind of maybe jumping ahead a little, one of the things that I'm working on right now is, because of my history, I'm not very good with authority. I'm really anti-authoritarian. Like it's my default state is to be anti-authoritarian. So everything something looks like it's authoritarian, I get a bit stroppy. I get a bit like, no, we can't do this. And I can, and I'm really like confronting both my own shadow and going, but I just throw my weight around. You know what I mean? Like because I'm not going to be responsible for that. I actually do have this personal power in the system. So it gets to be a little yucky and a little ugly. So dealing with that in my own coaching, but then also helping the system mirror that. So when I'm being like that, I have to make sure I've got people around me who are going, hang on, Angela, like, that thing you just did was not okay. Or could you just go and have a think about where that came from? Because that wasn't, that sounded I've got a really good colleague who's really good at going, that sounded like 6-year-old Angela, not the grown-up one who we need to come back to work today. Yeah. And then that, that extends out. So in the local community, all the local hearts have been engaged in doing development work. We don't measure them. They do self-assessments, and we're explicitly using the language. We're helping and developing people through a really, quite extensive leadership development journey, labs and coaching. And we have coaches internally who do this work, who are available at the end of the phone when people have to go, I don't know how to deal with this thing. And yeah, it's a big, I don't know how big a deal it is. I know that I don't think we could have done what we've done without it. I don't think we could keep being, because we're really countercultural in our sector. Financially, it's really challenging to work in this sector with, with the kind of compliance and business environment that we're in, and this space that gets created, and the kind of shared willingness to hold each other up and hold each other and value and honor the gifts of each of our stages and all of the capacity we bring, as well as own the shadow and own the stuff that we're not so good at, I think feels like that's really integral to building like a sense of community and a sense of security, but not naive security. Like, I don't think anybody imagines that we don't live in the real world and, bad things can happen. But there's, we have a monthly leadership meeting where about 50 or 60 people show up, and we have guests come regularly who just go, this is just extraordinary walking into this room and seeing the level of connection and honesty and straightness and courage and, willingness to look stupid and be bold. And yeah, it's I think it's one of our biggest strengths actually as an organization, that kind of okay, let's take a deep breath and think about what there is to go and deal with today. And it goes back to what I said earlier. So I feel like I'm kind of raving a little bit, but it goes back to what I said earlier about, this is 500 or 600 just regular, mostly 50-year-old women who are in people's homes going, let's talk about how you have your life work in an environment where there's increasing levels of loneliness and disconnection and like this huge commercialization of care and market, just, ugliness. I think through ugliness in that environment, and to stay human and to stay, despite all of that, we're gonna keep being like testing ourselves against this core sense of, is this who we want to be as human beings in the world, and is this who we want to be as citizens in this community? And I think that development work just kind of helps us keep true to that every day. Like, just helps us not ever look away from how hard it is, and not ever look away from making really difficult decisions, but at the same time holding each other to account and to our strengths, like reminding each other how brilliant we are when that's necessary, and reminding each other about how ridiculously awful we can be when that's necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you say about that it kind of grew out of necessity, really, like that you needed to have this culture of development and authenticity and community in order to do the work, because there's all these different levels of complexity. You've got, I mean, one thing you talked to me last week about how many of the people who now are I think like you call them hearts in the locals, right? These decentralized teams.
Hats.
Before that,
HAT. Yeah.
Oh, hats. Sorry,
they wear
hats.
A hat. No, that's my
I
funny
see.
accent.
It's like literally wearing a hat.
Yeah.
So they would have been previously like a more like a sort of supervisor type role, and then kind of effectively went to running a P&L and being like a business owner, basically, which is quite a shift. And then you have the complexity of the day-to-day, all of these unknown challenges that pop up, and the complexities of people's lives and things that are going on. And then the kind of meta level of all of the pressures that you're feeling from the Australian government and different policies that are introduced, or budget cuts, or all that kind of stuff, or things like pandemics. You have all of these things going on. So it strikes me that it also builds quite a lot of resilience, and kind of creates this sort of net that holds you all together, so that no one person ever has to sort of suffer that alone.
Yeah. I can't remember whose work it is. I did a program last year called Dancing with Mountains, which was extraordinary. It's a program that Bayo Akomalafe ran. I don't know if anybody knows his work, but it is beautiful. It's kind of beautiful evolution that kind of talks about there's nothing to do with systems. You just want to be in them and honor them and nurture them and support them along. But one of the really interesting conversations that emerged from that was the sense of nobody really can take care of themselves. Like that's a Western independent kind of notion that you should take care of yourself and that you have to practice self-care. So I think we do much more live in this notion that our job is to take care of other people, and if we take care of other people, somebody will take care of us and it'll all be okay. So that's that, even that in itself. So and that resilience is a social structure. It's not an individual. It's not. I mean, there's a sense of my own sense of self and strength and worthiness and capacity to kind of get up tomorrow and do the work. But I think we have at Chorus have a strong kind of sense of shared culturally and in structures going, no, our job is mostly to focus on other people. Somebody else is going to be focused on us. and that means that the system, so it builds resilience in, I think, a different kind of way than we often talk about in, I think in the West generally, or in more individualized cultures, because Australia is definitely a more individual. I'm Scottish. I think it's a much more collective kind of sense of culture, whereas in Australia, my sense is it's much more an individualized culture where there's more of that. My job's to, pick myself up by my bootstraps and make my life work, rather than, no, my job's to make sure I've got people around me who can, and together we'll take care of each other and it will be good. And I think if you think about that, both, again, for us in smaller groups in the organization and who we are in the community with there's no separation for us between who we are and the work we do. I think that's something that's really important, and that, the sense of we're in people's homes, and part of the thing that we do in people's homes is help them figure out how to get connected to a care system in their neighborhood. And that also means, like, am I getting connected to care systems in my neighborhood? Like, do I know my neighbor? So, we'll talk to team members as much about who do you know in your street that's going to come and take care of you if something goes wrong, as much as who at work is taking care of you if you need support. Are you with me? It gets, it gets quite blurry. And then there's a real shadow of that. So, I think I shared with you before, I deliver a service every week to a customer. I've seen her for 3.5 years, every Friday morning. And about 3 weeks ago, for the first time, I was sick on Friday morning and I couldn't go. I had, that happens so seldom. But I was like, I can't, how do I deal with the fact that she's going to try and go and get the wet washing at the washing machine unless somebody comes, and she's going to, that sense of real, it's like she's my, my mum or my, somebody in my family, and it's not that. So I think there is this real developmental challenge about how do you maintain that kind of professional relationship as well, because they're not your family and your team members are not your family. But we had I think I shared with you last time we talked, we had a situation recently in one of our, like, the leadership meetings. We were talking a little bit about accountability. We might come onto it a wee bit. There was still this sense in the room. We were exploring, what what would have us become more accountable? And there was this conversation emerged about, we still need to be doing more work to make it safe for people to speak up. And we just really spent time diving into that, like what's underneath it. Like, there's legitimately no reason for anybody to be scared of chorus. Like, it's not like nobody gets sacked, but you have to be really bad, like really awful. And what got uncovered was there was a sense of exhaustion about dealing with each other's emotional stuff. It's kind of because in a culture like this where we are sharing a lot and it is very human, this boundary between, but I just need you to not bring that. Like, I need you not to be talking to me about your kid's drug problem or the fact that, you're financially under stress, or, whatever it might be, because it's that again, I think that's sometimes the shadow side of, if everything's allowed and everything's supported, and this work system becomes a primary support system, then there's some real risks in there as well. So anyway, can't quite recall how I got there. So maybe you can maybe bring me back. So what was the question?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were talking about like development and how crucial that is. But I really resonate with the shadow sides that you share. And I was thinking also when you were talking about, when you had to take a day off sick, and I think a shadow side of organizations where there's a strong emphasis on caring and empathy, and people who are very committed, very responsible. The shadow side of that is that we can be overly responsible and take on, everyone's stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was talking to some of the nurses in Buurtzorg, the kind of famous Dutch home care organization of 10,000 people, no bosses. Their biggest struggle is burnout. That they are so committed and caring and dedicated. These nurses were telling me what we use our coach for very often is, this person is on the edge of burnout. We want to support her. We don't know how to empower her to, slow down or take some time off, or, so it's interesting that even when we don't have this boss, we have this like inner boss, like the tyranny of the inner boss. And learning how to be caring and responsible, and also boundaried, I think is quite a learning edge for a lot of us in this movement.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know that that's necessarily, let me have a think how I want to say that. It would be interesting to experiment or get some sense of whether or not that is more about being in the care world or if that gets exacerbated in these more kind of self-organizing systems rather than in more structured hierarchical systems. Because I've worked in healthcare for quite a long time as well, and in hospitals, and I see it there too. Like, I don't know that it's even when it's
not
quite
only
hierarchical.
But I think what's interesting is that I assumed if you took away the sort of, top-down boss or the top-down structures, we would be, I naively assumed, we would be much better then at like self-regulating, we could together make sure that we weren't overworking. But I think we've internalized a lot of that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
whatever sector you're working in, even when you take away the hierarchical structures, there is some shadow work about what's my inner tyrant that sort of that cracks the whip inside me, and how can I, become aware of that and ask other people to support me in that.
And I think there is, again, this may be a little more contentious and it may change over time, but I do think there's also, I think there is a gender lens on there. I've again worked in different kinds of organizations that are very male, and burnout there does show up a little differently, I think, in terms of that, like the investment in work and accountability. But I also think certainly certainly my observation would also be that when you because the organizational kick, if you like, professional care doesn't exist outside of a broader structure that doesn't, mostly my experience is people aren't taking care of their neighbors. that we're not checking on each other. So there's something around you're trying to do that inside a container that isn't big enough. Like the outside container isn't supporting it either in terms of, oh, it's okay, I can't put that down because I know there are 5 other people who can step in. It's like, no, if I put it down, it literally doesn't happen, because there's no fat in these big care systems to, and human work's wobbly work. It's loose work. You need good buffers and edges around. I don't know that I could cope with showing up for somebody who's, really struggling today. And if I'm struggling today, and there's very little, I don't know else has to say that there's no fat in that system.
Yeah, no buffer.
There's no buffer. And again, I think with organizations like us and Birdsong, we definitely know them well and really aspire to be like them in many ways. We weren't quite as clever as they were in terms of getting the funding model aligned, but I think this work around how do you navigate those spaces that enough connection to be human and enough distance to stay appropriately separate. Yeah. I have no answer to that other than you keep learning and trying and failing and going, oh well, failed today in this, and that got too close, or not enough connection here, not enough attention to those relationships. But I think the key thing is, one of the many things is just being willing to directly talk about every day. So, I think there are fewer and fewer conversations across Chorus where people will talk about a thing, and not deal with, well, how is the relationship that we have influencing that thing? Does that kind of make sense? It's just in the room all the time. We just don't not talk about the thing that's actually making the difference, which is the level of, so what's happening in our relationship that's making this go this way? So that feels not like an answer, but like an avenue or a way to attain to, either I'm feeling over obliged, or I'm feeling undervalued, or I'm feeling not used enough, or is that available to be transparent and
yes,
because if you can't name it, you can't talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a kind of a reflective muscle and a relational muscle, constantly talking about and reflecting on, okay, what's happening there, what's in the relationship. And that's, there is no answer, there is no destination. It's just a daily practice, really.
And I think the other practice, if we're thinking about practice that we have gotten better at over the last couple of years, is bringing guests, bringing clean eyes in. So, I think we've been working with a couple of organizations who are doing some research, and we have friends, we have people who are called Friends of Chorus. We have other organizations who we partner with, and we'll often invite them into leadership conversations or design conversations or service development conversations. And their job is to talk about what they see in our dynamic. So that's really helpful. To kind of go, let's bring somebody in to help us look at ourselves, because it's hard to look at yourself.
Yeah, that sounds sensible. I want to come back to this theme of accountability that you mentioned, because I think this is a really juicy topic. And I think when I talk to people who don't know that there is another way of organizing, and I say that there are, organizations working in health and care that are working in a decentralized way, people are very shocked. But how does that work? How can you be safe? How can you be compliant if you don't have a boss? So I think it's an interesting one. How do you create a culture of accountability, replacing those structures with more decentralized and distributed leadership? So I'm curious, how have you been navigating that at Chorus?
Yeah. Again, mostly by evolving it, but so I sometimes do like to share a story. We had an auditor come about 2 years ago, we had an order come who said, I feel more confident about the quality of care that this organization is providing than many others, and you're not compliant. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Because it doesn't look, they just couldn't figure out how to tick the boxes to say we were actually being accountable the way that it's supposed to look. Whereas they knew by talking to customers and team members that actually we were. So we have gotten better at that. We're now more and more able to articulate where accountability lives, how it gets exercised, who accounts for what. So I think some of the big shifts that have happened is one of them has been around accountability isn't it lives in a psychological relationship. So it's both the inner work and the outer work. So that is outer structures where accountability lives. So we could now share a bunch of documents that go, this is the group of people who've said they will be accountable for this group of outcomes or this area of quality. So that's matured over time. And they are peer groups. And they are the exercise. So, for example, we have an internal audit function that is a peer function. So one local will go and audit another local. And again, that's really interesting process in terms of, the peer audit. I need to be confident enough to tell you as my colleague that this is not how this should look.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I need to not become just a jerk about that and go, this is not how it should look. And that we're in this shared learning experience together and practice experience together. And that gets swapped around. So we do audits every 2 months. Different locals audit different locals on different things. So we're building that real kind of sense of it's okay for other people to come and look. It's okay for people to come and check. Check-in's okay. You just don't need to be someone more serious to do the check. It's like you just don't and that is very default. It's kind of that notion that the only person who should be observing or making some kind of analysis or observation or report about my performance should somehow or other be more senior than I am. So it's taken a little while to build that trust and okayness and practice, and took some conflict navigation and all of those things. And so those structures we have the locals work together in what are called hubs. So the hats in that hub share so the hats kind of share accountability for the performance of the local. That's how that works. It's not everybody in the local, and there's usually 3 or 4 hats, and they'll meet every 2 weeks with their colleagues and other locals, and we share all the data. So so everybody can see everybody's P&L, everybody can see everybody's compliance reports, everybody can see everybody's customer feedback. It's all the data is public. So that helps people to be accountable, to go, here's what there is for me to account for rather than be held accountable for. That's a really important shift. And psychologically, I think that's a really important shift. So then on an annual basis, as we build, well, what is the budget going to look like for this local this year? And what do you want to deliver this year? And what are you going to work on this year? That it's that practice of in those hubs making agreements and then talking about, well, how are you going to monitor whether or not you keep those agreements, and what new data do you need, and what practices are we going to build? And the coaches support them. There are coaches and mentors who work really closely in the hubs to support the leads, and the hats do that together. So I would say that we're getting, we've matured a lot in making promises. We're way better at going, yeah, yes, I will be accountable for that. Or no, I'm just not going to be. I can't be. I legitimately can't promise to deliver that result. That would just be being saying something to look good. So no, getting much better at proposing things, saying, I recommend that we do this. And so we've got a structure for how people propose decisions to be made to there are different leadership forums where different kinds of decisions go. We're about to start practicing monitoring agreements with I can't remember what they're called. You had a guest a couple of weeks ago.
Confirmation practices.
Confirmation practices. We're about to start
goody.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. We're about. So one of my colleagues is building the kind of structure for, well, what would that look like? And, and each of the hubs and each of the locals building that muscle, because that's been missing. So even though we've gotten really, really good at making promises and sharing accountability and looking at all the data together, this ability to go, well, what do I do with it now if somebody's not delivering what they said? Or, how do we lean in and say, no, that's legitimate. You just need to make a new agreement because that, for some reason that thing didn't get done. Or no, that actually isn't okay. That's something has to happen for you to get back on track there, because that's actually not okay. Because I think in this system, what happens, particularly with money, because we're always weird about money, because everybody can see everybody else's P&L. If one local's performing really well financially and another one isn't, everybody knows that local is subsidizing this one. Does that make sense? Because it's not like this. At the end of the day, it's a single bucket of money that we use to, we generate revenue, we pay people. So there is there is psychological pressure, if you like, that's peer pressure to kind of go, I have to attend to the things that I need to attend to. And if we get a non-compliant report from an auditor, it's not just one local, it's everybody. Like, it's the whole system isn't compliant. If it's not compliant in one place, it's not compliant everywhere. So again, it's both the internal work of being willing to go, I'm going to say what I think I can do. We're again beginning to really practice that. I'm going to come and account for what I said I was going to do and whether I did it, rather than somebody's holding me to account for that. And build. That's the next muscle to build. And then occasionally, again, it's what hasn't disappeared is occasionally there are just really bad things that happen. And then on those occasions, the people in the system will often go, Angela, I think you need to come and deal with this. Like, that's beyond our capacity or our scope, or, there's been a serious incident, or someone's really breached the code of conduct in a way that really isn't acceptable. And it's not that the locals couldn't handle that, but they just sometimes want to go, no, that needs a bit more power in the system to kind of go, like, I need somebody else to kind of go, am I sacking this person today? Bluntly, like, that's, nobody's got the authority to sack anybody, basically, other than two of us in the organization. So at the point that it gets to be that significant, we will bring in a level of, which feels a little bit hierarchical power, but it's much more like, who are the appropriate people to bring a big enough picture and body of thinking to all of the associated risks in this situation to make the call. So, I would say even a couple of years ago, we in accountability, so I had my very first week at Chorus, I went to a leadership meeting, one of these big leadership meetings, and there was a real pull from the community to have a rule book. So it's evolved to a playbook. So we now have a playbook, and it's getting more and more mature. So there are guidelines. It's not like everybody's doing whatever they want. But there was this pull for this, like, write a playbook. We want a playbook. We want a guidebook. And this big meeting, I went, so who should write it? And it was such an interesting conversation to go, who should write the rule book? And and I was sharing earlier, my kid went to school in the UK for a couple of years, to a school called Summer Hill, which, so I was a member of that community for a little while, and that's got one of the biggest rule books I've ever seen in my life, that was built by this community. It's huge, but it's alive and it's dynamic, and it keeps getting, evolved and iterated, and and the community holds each other to account for working to the rule book that they aligned on. So I think one of the things that's been really important in Chorus is that the people who wrote the rule book weren't somebody in head office somewhere. It was every single play was aligned on by the community. Every single one of them. It took a long time. Still takes time to get that done, because, something new happens in the external environment, and then you have to go through this whole alignment process about, I think it's one of the funny things about distributed systems. Like, when I'm talking to the locals, they'll often say, can we just have a consistent way that we have to do this? And and then we'll propose something, and they'll go, no, we want it consistent, but we want it to do it the way that we do it. And I'm like, no, if you're going to have it consistent. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges of working in these kinds of systems, is no differently, but to actually get authentic alignment, and that's just 20 of them. And we've just added 4 more this year. And, that's growing. At some point, you kind of go, how do you scale that without, how do you scale that to go, well, I think is what Bertsold do remarkably well. Because I think they do have tight guidelines. It's like, no, this is how you do this kind of care. And that's not negotiable. So we're not quite as mature as that yet, that we've got to the point where we've kind of gone, this is what this has to look like. And there's no wriggle room in there. So, we've got a way to go in terms of that. Both how do you build it? And then once you've built it, how do you, build structures that govern it, so whether or not people are in or out, or, it is being, and that's both can keep coming back to both the inner and outer, the structures that make that true, but also the psychological space and safety in the relationships that people will hold each other as peers and colleagues to stay, just stay on track with that, rather than pretend, cover it up, or so I think it's a fascinating space. This, for me, the heart of it is, what am I willing to be counted on for? Like, that's how we have what can I count on you for? You get to say.
Yeah. I think it's such a ripe area, and like I really think we collectively in the world could benefit from reframing how we relate to accountability, because it's so tied to punishment and consequences, and it's very often like a weird, like, temporal thing. Like, accountability is usually thought of when something went wrong, and then whereas I love what you were talking about like proactively. There was a great podcast conversation I heard with a disability justice activist called Mia Mingus, and she was saying we need to shift from holding people accountable, which is sort of a violent image, isn't it? Holding someone accountable, to proactively supporting people to take accountability themselves.
Yeah.
And as you said, I think there's a combination of making the implicit explicit, creating clear agreements, being clear when I'm promising something. In TUF, we have this practice that my colleague Carl Eric suggested, of like distinguishing between, yes, it's my intention to do that, and I promise to do that. That it's helpful for people to know how to relate to me. Is it a promise or is it an intention? And trying to upfront be much clearer about communicating that. And then also having agreements, or building that muscle of, when there is a breach, how do you deal with that in a way that is compassionate, but is also sort of tough? Like, how can it be both? Because we tend to be scared of, we can only be one or the other. But it's possible to be both.
Yeah, and I think a couple of other things kind of emerged when you were saying that. One is around, and this is more like in that, when you bring the developmental lens as well, start with the assumption that that human being is being accountable for everything that they can be accountable for right now. And if what they can be accountable for right now is less than what is necessary to get their job done, then there's a conversation to be had. And is that temporary or is that permanent? Actually, there is a reality that goes, this person actually doesn't have the capacity to hold accountability for this body of work or this complexity of work. And let's be honest and kind and responsible about dealing with that. And there was another thing that was in my head, and it just flew straight back out again. Oh, it's gone. Sorry, but that felt important, because I think that is how we work much more about, like, because you have to assume positive intent. Like, it's not like I've got the capacity to be accountable for more and I'm just being difficult. That's the other thing I was going to say. And because any organizational outcome often like, there's an interrelationship of accountability. It's like, I'll promise to deliver this thing, but that is actually, and I don't mean just in project interdependencies. I mean, it really does mean that if you do that thing, then I can do this thing. And if you don't get that bit, if you, like, either sequentially or because I need you to partner me in doing the pieces that are not mine to do, and navigating that, I think, is equally as critical. And you know, like, can I check in and go, how is that going? You said you're getting it done on Thursday. Can I still rely on that? Or like, and not have that feel like a checking in conversation or
Yeah.
you know, and particularly when you've just got these informal power dynamics, like I have to constantly, because I lead in lots of places, but I'm a member of different squads as a member, a participant. And you know, I have to be really consciously considerate about when I say to a squad colleague, I'm putting my squad member hat on and I'm just checking in where you're at with this. No, I'm putting my, you know, the hat that I've got where I'm called a strategic coach and I've got a little bit more power in the system. So
Hmm.
work again I think for all of us who've got power, working every single day to attend to it so that it doesn't get in the way.
Yeah.
In ways that are irresponsible, and then owning it when you need to own it and be responsible for it, you know, in that dynamic.
Yeah, I also think listening to you, I think about how common it is that when someone is not being accountable, we make all kinds of assumptions and interpretations about that. And you know, we tend to respond in a kind of parental way. If you're a nice parent, maybe you assume, oh, maybe it was too difficult for them, so maybe I'll take some things away or I'll help them with this. Or if you're a bit more of a tough parent, then maybe you think, okay, they need to be performance managed, or they need to blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And it might not be either. It's like, ask, you know.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm noticing.
Yeah.
What's happening? Like, tell me what's going on, and then seeing what is it that's missing. Is it lack of
Oh,
clarity? Maybe
oh,
they don't have clarity on something, or is it capacity? Is it particular circumstance that's going on? You know, something that is useful for the system to know about, rather than sort of swooping in and.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Or is it literally that you didn't put it in your calendar?
Yeah.
You know, because I think there's a you know, another thing I think we're getting a little better at as an organization is going, you know, not only when I make a promise, but am I being, I don't know if accountable is the right word, but am I structuring how I'm going to keep that promise by actually scheduling the work somewhere, or, you know, and I think that is a distinction between an intention and
Hmm.
in a promise. It's like, well, you know, one of the things that I try and I try and role model is go, you can see what I'm being accountable for by looking in my diary, and my diary is public. You know, you should go and look. And again, doing that as a role model and going, like, really trying to encourage everybody to go, just leave, you know, people know what you're up to when there's nothing, you don't need, just leave your diary open.
Mm.
And then, you know, you know, I think this also this thing around a request includes a request for a conversation. So stick some, like, it took me about a year for people to stop emailing me or messaging me to say, could I put something in your diary? I'm like, if it's a space, you know, a request for a meeting is a request. It's fine. You don't have to ask 3 times to make sure it's okay to do that. So even these little things, they're so little, but they're so, like, I don't know, they take time and energy and keep power
Yes.
imbalances in place. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. It takes more than just permission. People have to
Yeah.
really take some time to unlearn these
Mm,
little moments of like
yeah.
seeking approval or
Mm,
deference. Or I
yeah.
want to ask you, Angela, what is your what has your personal journey in this been? You know, as a human being. I mean, it sounds like you have been a kind of lifelong student of lots of different um, development practices and so on. But during your time at Chorus, like
Oh,
what has been challenging for you? What has been, you know, a real learning or growth moment for you?
oh. Well, interestingly, given this is a very flat and organic kind of structure, my age, certainly in the last little while, has been about there are actually times where this system wants me to exercise authority, and it trusts me to exercise authority. And I think that, interestingly enough, that's where it gets quite wobbly. Like, there's something that's remarkably moving to know that, you know, like, these 900 people trust me to make this decision. And I don't kind of sometimes know how to just sit with that. Whereas this, and and not because I've got a job title, like actually they trust you with this, and holding. I don't even know how to talk about that in a way that makes sense anymore, other than you just have to, and I think that's a common experience in chorus, but some people are just more comfortable or familiar with it than others. But because I've veered away from that very much in my own work, in my own community, it's like, oh, okay. That's taken something, like, oh, and it's sometimes ugly and clunky, but so that's my age right now. The other thing for me has been, because we do, and this isn't just for me, but I think it is for me and it is for everybody, I think because everybody delivers care work, regardless of what your job title is, I have the deepest respect for people who do this work every day. It's like, it's the deepest respect. We should be paying these people a fortune. Like, it's kind of, Jesus, like the emotional labor and the actual genuine care and the willingness every day to show up and, deal with the complexity of people's lives, as well as make sure the toilet's clean. And, it's that, and I don't even know what, in terms of the journey, what I've learned from that, but other than like, I think there's a humility that's present, and the sense of, this is really honorable work. Yeah. So I don't know if that's what my learning is, my appreciation and my sense of, this is really honorable work, and we should be finding bigger and better ways to honor it, because it is extraordinary, that the difference. And the need for this work expands, I want to more and more be an advocate for how do we find more and more ways for this to be honored. And the other thing, this is a joy. Like, it's a joy for me that I could talk about how much I love my colleagues. And that love is a word that is a very normal word to use every day when I go to work. Like, it's like that's extraordinary. And then, and I think what I've noticed for myself is, because I also work in different kinds, because of both my role and because of my life, I'm in other organizations and in other contexts quite a lot, that I feel more and more confident to just show up in other places and be that way and not be embarrassed or apologetic about it, which is kind of cool. It's, like, there's something around, let's just infect the system with talking about love and joy and being kind and being honest and raw and truthful, and dealing with when that doesn't, like, I think this is this has been really cool, dealing with the when it doesn't go well, like that skill, and how do I clean this up, and not just at an individual level, but at a system level, because some of the things that I do, or that, because I've got such a big influence in this system, and we work so hard to make sure everybody's aligned and it's collective, but occasionally you just screw up, and it's like, whoops. And then, the willingness to be on a stage and share with the community, sorry, that was not how I intended that to go, or, be publicly accountable. Actually, that is definitely I'm definitely getting better at doing that, being willing to be very, very publicly, transparently accountable, and trust that my own intentions are honorable. And even if I don't know, trust that that was the best I could do today. Even like everybody, that's the best I could, that happened. Give myself the benefit of the doubt as well, in terms of, you did what you could, that was the best you could do, it went badly, now you go do the work of cleaning it up and repairing it and restoring what there is to be restored. And and I think that's an ongoing piece of development work, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. And again, particularly in our circumstances, I literally do, and I think we all do go, if we do something really, really bad, it does actually have bad consequences. Like, it's not like you lose some money, like, it could go bad. Yeah. So
Yeah. The stakes are
that,
high.
yeah. And but the gifts are extraordinary. Like, I think there is also something about, so this will be the last thing to say. It's really easy to get scared by the risks. It's really easy to get scared and go, oh, but that this sense of this community going, no, we'll be okay. We can trust this. We can stand here together. We're not reckless, and we're not gonna let people get hurt. But we can keep pushing the edges of what good practice looks like, and what good accountability looks like, and what shared leadership looks like. With that, yeah.
Oh, I could talk to you for hours, but but yeah. So if I attempt to give you a kind of wrapping up question, then what would you say to listeners of this podcast then, who are, you know, people like you and your colleagues who have been listening, and, you know, people who are exploring some of these principles and practices in their own organization, or would like to? What would you say to them if you had any advice?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably a couple of things. I think probably three things. One is, you could practice a practices regardless of what your structure is. So, you know, the practice of sharing power, you could practice anywhere with anybody. Practice it at home, practice it with your neighbor, practice it in your community. You're gonna just start to practice it. And, you know, because I think this noticing, where have I got power, where have I not, how do I give it away, how do I take it when I need to take it when it's mine. So I think that is so core to how organizational systems work, and is let's talk about power, and let's talk about where it is and how it's moving and how it's traveling. So, and there's lots of places that you could learn different ways of doing that. So I think that would be just start, just start there. I think the adult development lens is a really important lens, I think, for us individually and collectively. So again, it doesn't matter what structures you work in or what kind of organization you work in. I'd suggest anybody who wants to think about maturing an organization to different kinds of leadership, decision-making, collaborative structures needs to have at least an understanding of capacity as a developmental phenomena, and how to navigate it, both my own capacity, why different places in the system may be aligning or, you know, synergetic with me, or where there might be dissonance, and seeing how that lens contributes to that thinking. And I think the other thing is just go play in some different spaces. Like if it's really hard in your organization where you do your day job, just go find somewhere else to play for a while. So, you know, I think things like I'm an active member of the Worm Data community, and, you know, just go find a tribe who's interested in, you know, keep listening to the podcast, you know, find the tribes in your neighborhood who are doing this kind of work, and make connections. And, you know, there is something around, if you're waiting for permission, I mean, that sounds really crass, but if you're waiting for permission, it's never coming. You know, it's just never coming. You're just gonna, and but maybe the last thing for me is, this is not about just how organizations work. This for me is about how society is structured, and how we do operate together as good citizens, and take shared accountability for how our communities work. So there's also something for me about, if you're not making the difference you want to make in that environment, literally go and contribute it somewhere else, because there will be somewhere in your neighborhood or in your community or in your professional network who want you, and who are hungry for you to come and contribute there. And that's a good kind of training ground, really, for learning how you might begin to then influence in more formal structures and move them along.
Yes, great advice. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say that you would be sad that you didn't say?
I don't know if there'll be. Maybe the last thing to say is just, and I kind of just reinforcing what I just said there. This is not a solo sport. This is a team game. Like, it's a team game, and I think if there was nothing else to say other than find the tribe. This is, you know, I reckon these kinds of big level system transformations occur when tribes coalesce, they get together, it's a movement when movements occur, because you energetically find the people in the places that are up for the same things that you're up for. And you know, I think both personally and organizationally, we keep coming back to, what is it that I'm doing this for? Like, you know, what's this for? And yeah, just keep reminding yourselves in each other, what it's for. Yeah. And, keep loving the people. Just keep loving them.
Yes.
That's my last word. Just keep loving the people.
Yeah. You've really got to meet my friend Xavier. He's a big advocate for love in organizations, and he's a real leader in this movement as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this
pleasure.
conversation. It was really rich, and I really appreciate your honesty and your openness to share what you've been learning. It's really inspiring. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.